Brilliant to see you, and brilliant to see us in our brand new, beautiful TKM Associates t-shirts. All set for IRMS conference in Birmingham in a month's time, if not less. So that's all very exciting.
I'm glad we went with the black. It is very forgiving.
I don't know what you can possibly mean, Frank. Explain yourself.
Hides a multitude, although I do need to make sure I pack anti-dandruff shampoo for Birmingham, so.
I think you too much information going on here, Frank. I think it's really important that we move on swiftly. While we're sitting here, you being my two brilliant, gorgeous TKM associate members, I'm very conscious, particularly so much of what particularly you guys do is a lot of that really kind of heavy listening and important training, including in terms of qualifications. And from my perspective, and this that I'm guessing from others that I work with and I also kind of support, sometimes I get a bit confused about the different terminology within this whole area, like about qualifications, getting certificates, being certified, a course being certified. How does that relate to qualifications? I think it'd be grand maybe for a couple of minutes. Could you maybe, the two of you, help demystify some of this terminology and give a kind of some practical guidance to me and to others? That would be fab. Excellent.
Okay, so you quite often see online quite a lot of conversations around certified DPOs, data protection officers. And of course, within the wider information governance field, I think it has always been traditionally quite difficult for our subject matter expertise, because there is no accepted route that people need to follow to go into certain roles. And one of the really important things to remember about the DPO, and when people talk about being a certified DPO, is that within the UK, certainly, we don't have any UK-wide scheme for data protection officers. So while people may have a qualification that is marketed as a certification, and of course it will be certified if people are given a certificate at the end, if it's certified in some way by the provider, it's not recognised by the regulator, and there's no one single recognised scheme within the UK to become a DPO. So there's lots of options for people out there.
Can I just for 1 second, that really is actually giving me a light bulb moment. So if it says certified course, it simply means you will get a certificate at the end of that course. It's nothing more formal than that.
Well, it depends, because of course we've got lots of professional organisations in the UK that do have certified members, and that means that they have achieved a particular level or a particular competence in their chosen profession. So you have certified and chartered accountants, for example, and that has a very specific meaning, but we don't have the same accepted meaning within the world of data protection officers, or indeed in the wider world. I don't think of information governance. I can't actually think of any kind of certified roles. I don't know if either of you can.
Oh, and we need to be careful of the language as well. I think there's sometimes a misunderstanding because the word certification has specific meaning in the UK GDPR in Article 42. But of course, that's not what is meant here, because there isn't a mechanism for the certification, as GDPR intends it, of individuals. That just doesn't exist.
Sure.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. And you know, you have lots of courses are certificated, so you will get a certificate at the end. But again, it's not always clear exactly what that certificate means. And this is what you need to look into. Any training is good training, as far as I'm concerned. Any CPD, you know, any development of your knowledge is something that you need to investigate, because it's very personal in terms of what is going to be of benefit to people. But when you're trying to choose a course and trying to decide how to move forward within the data protection officer world, if that's what you want to do, or just more generally in terms of data protection advice and working in that area, you just need to be clear exactly what is on offer from your chosen training provider.
And I guess also a precursor to that is working out your own needs analysis, whether that's independently yourself or with those in your organisation that require you to develop your skills here. It's understanding what are your needs and then going out and finding out what providers out there meet those needs.
Yeah. And also different training providers have got different styles. You know, their approach to training is different. And, you know, It's about finding a training provider that provides good content, but also delivers it in a learning style that suits you.
Sure. No, that's a really good point. Yeah.
And when you look back at what the legislation actually says, it's not hugely prescriptive in terms of data protection officers particularly. So it talks about professional qualities, and there's not been a huge amount of work done around that in the UK. So there is some guidance. If you look, for example, at the EDPB guidance, which obviously we're no longer in the EU, but it's definitely worth a look at. And of course, if we look at other EU regulators, so for example, the Spanish regulator's done a huge amount of work around what are professional qualities, and in fact requires people to be assessed in some way. So they do have a national scheme in Spain. And of course, the other part of the legislation talks about having expert knowledge. And I think the vast majority of people that work in the data protection fields are really hesitant to call themselves experts, because there are just so many different aspects to what you need to know. But of course, it's all about maintaining. That's what the legislation requires. It requires you to be supported in maintaining your expert knowledge. And that's going to be really context driven in terms of what you actually need to maintain. So, what kind of organization are you working in? What data are you working with? How high risk are your business processes? Your volumes of data, all of that kind of thing are likely to be influencing, to some extent at least, what your learning needs actually are.
And I guess that's both the absolute key here, as in many aspects of this, is context, but also having gone out and got the training that you require, understanding if and when you need to consider refresher training, particularly in terms of anything with a qualification that is time limited and can go stale, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, again, my view would be very much that all training is good training. It's good to continuously improve. CPD, continuous professional development, is something that should be encouraged. And of course, we've already talked about the legislation requiring you to maintain your expert knowledge. But there is no specific legal obligation in terms of how frequently you need to train. Now, of course, some of the providers of qualifications do have requirements, and that's absolutely something that is within their gift. If that is the criteria to stay qualified, then that's what obviously you need to do for each one of those. I don't know if you'd add anything to that, Frank.
No, I guess one of the big factors, of course, is, when there is change in the legislation, change in the guidance of the regulators, change in the case law. So I don't think setting a particular timescale is helpful. It's just about keeping current with data protection law in general, but also in your sector. What are the issues? What's the current guidance? What's the current best practice?
No. Yeah, and absolutely, and as you say, case law is a classic, isn't it? Because we generally will know the big cases that are coming to court, although not necessarily with huge amounts of notice. And then, as we're about to talk about, if you do have accredited training or anything that is certificated or quality assured, those times frames for actually getting that training updated can be pretty lengthy. So that is kind of the downside to perhaps having something that is more formalized, which is really what we're going to go on to talk about, compared to training courses that are perhaps more informal, more discursive maybe, and are there really to explore issues as opposed to deliver set content.
Yeah, no, sure. And I guess that's it. So yeah, it's working out, how do I know what training to do when there are so many options out there?
Yeah, and I think I would always say to people, what are you trying to get out of it? Why are you doing this training, or why do you want to do the training? And if it is to get a recognised qualification, then that's what you need to do. If it is to cover particular topics that you're interested in, then there's a whole range of different training and qualification resources out there. But it's really important to understand exactly what you'd want to do, and also, linked to that quite often is going to be what kind of information you're going to be working with. And that's not just data protection. I think that's wider as well. With some of these qualifications, it's actually quite important to be able to practically apply. For me anyway, the value comes from being able to apply what you've done, which can be difficult if you have a really generic course. Sometimes it's not always easy to see how things apply when you get back into the workplace or move into a new workplace.
I suppose that's a good example about finding the kind of training provider that is more inclined to use contextual things as opposed to those who might do it in a more kind of purist way, which again is about shopping around asking other people that you know have gone on courses, so you get something that actually meets your needs, your learning style, as well as the requirements for the organisation you're working for.
Yeah, and I think when you're in terms of looking at accreditation, it's definitely worth looking at that. So what the accreditation does the majority of time is it does give you some guarantee about, firstly, what you're going to cover, because generally accredited courses will have a syllabus. And secondly, most of them will have some kind of quality assurance mechanisms. Now, some are more robust than others. And if they are if the courses are certificated by an awarding body, then it is likely to have pretty rigorous quality assurance mechanisms, particularly if it's by a regulated awarding body. So, for example, we at TKM use the SQA to certificate and quality assure some of our qualifications. So that's the Scottish Qualifications Authority. They have those mechanisms in place to make sure that standards of assessment, not only the marking of assessment, but of course the development of assessment in the first place actually matches the syllabus. Everybody's being assessed to the same standards, and those standards are being kept up to date. We also deliver the BCS. Now, the BCS is not covered by a regulator, so they are not covered by Ofqual, and the BCS do make that very clear in their own documentation, because they have other mechanisms by which they quality assure that the work that they do and the training qualifications that they deliver. But nevertheless, it's still certificated by an awarding body, so the BCS being the British Computing Society.
Could I just one thing there? Sorry, Liz. With SQA, Scottish Qualifications Authority, does that only apply to people who are working in Scotland, or for data protection, for example, because it's UK legislation, can you still go down that route whether or not you're based in Scotland or beyond?
Yeah, absolutely. So the SQA is literally an awarding body, but the qualifications we deliver are UK. In fact, we have actually kept our syllabus purposely broad. So in fact, it still covers the EU GDPR as well. And we are always willing to look at other legislation in terms of data protection law, in terms of what our qualifications actually cover. So the way in which we've written the framework is actually quite flexible, and to make sure that we're still covering, certainly until the legislation diverges, we have a framework that will allow assessments for people that are perhaps working with the EU GDPR as well as the UK GDPR, or perhaps even just the EU GDPR.
I think often in my experience, people who work in their kind of roles, so people in data protection or information governance roles, the practitioners, they tend not to be so interested in accreditation and things like that, but the people who might be interested could be your HR or your organisational development people, or indeed your budget holders. So when it comes to making the case for training, it might be quite useful to be able to explain to the budget holder or to the training people in your organisation that there is accreditation of these courses.
I completely agree. And if you want kind of additional quality assurance checks on top of that, something else you might want to look for are courses that are on the qualifications and competency frameworks. Now, there's a range of these. So there is one specific for Scotland. There is also one for England and Wales, and there's a European-wide framework as well. What these do is they align the qualifications that you have in all the countries. So if you have, for example, A-levels or highers, you know that they're sitting where they're sitting on the qualifications framework. So we have gone through the process of putting our qualifications on those frameworks for anybody that's interested, so that you have got a guarantee about how they align with other courses and qualifications. And again, we're not unique in that respect. So it's something that we thought was important for quality, but a number of the universities have done this as well. So you will find other information governance courses and data protection courses that have gone through this same process. Always worth having a look if that's something that you're interested in, particularly if you want to check something is actually going to develop your knowledge. So if you know what level of knowledge you have already, it can be quite useful to check those frameworks and see, which level you kind of need to go to for anything where you're going to develop skills and knowledge. One thing I would say, of course, is if you are looking at something on those frameworks, of course, it almost certainly will have an assessment, because you have to be able to demonstrate your skills and competencies across a range of areas. So if that's not for you, then it probably won't matter to you. Again, picking up on Frank's point, sometimes these things are more important to people that are actually paying for the training, because they want the assurance of the level and the standard, and of course the quality of a particular course.
That's really, really helpful. Really helpful. Thank you so much to both of you on that front, and hopefully it will be of use to others like me who are needing a bit of demystification. So enjoy the rest of your day. Enjoy the world audience that is there, and hopefully we'll be able to do another little video which might be useful to you all also. So just do let us know, and see you soon. Bye.